Should my organization focus on building impact, or should it focus more on building infrastructure? This is a very common question that comes up in impact work. Most often, this question comes up in smaller organizations or in smaller teams. And to be clear, I have seen organizations of various sizes and structures doing impact work. And in some cases, even in very large organizations, it's a small team of people that are working on creating a community engagement or impact type of strategy. On the other end of the spectrum, there are very small nonprofits asking this question, or nonprofits that have been in existence for a while that are wanting to grow and wanting to get past the level that they are currently functioning at. The mission-based work has already begun in this case. Let's talk today to that small team that's trying to build an impact, either as an independent organization that is a few years old, an established organization that has a long history but finds itself stuck at a specific level, or to that small team within a large company that's trying to do something meaningful for a certain group of people or community. Should we focus on impact more, or should we focus on the infrastructure around that impact? I'm going to answer that question for you today, but it's helpful to define certain things that are talked about commonly in this type of work that don't always get answered. One of those key things is scale. Scale is a term that has been borrowed from the startup world to talk about expansion and growth. And often in the context it was developed in, it means to expand rapidly or to grow rapidly. In most cases, organizations that are developing or wanting to get to another level, when they say the word scale, don't really have in mind that concept of explosive growth where they're trying to build toward an exit of their company to be acquired or something like that. Scale often means something much more nuanced but important to the organization. Scale looks like, for example, the executive director being able to take a comfortable vacation without worrying about what's happening back in the office. Scale might look like if a key employee were to exit, the organization would continue to function and wouldn't feel crippled by the loss of an important individual who's doing a critical amount of the work. Scale might look like being able to stretch to that next contract or that next obligation. Maybe it's applying for a government contract or applying for a larger grant or expanding to a new community because people in that region or area have requested that your organization come and do some work there. Scale is often much more simple than becoming a national organization or becoming an organization that grows rapidly. Scale often simply really does mean infrastructure. It means systems and processes that create sustainability within the organization or within the team or the function itself. So when a mission-based organization, the small team that we're talking about, the 3 to 5 person team within a large organization or the small nonprofit that's functioning with under 10 employees, when we're talking about scale, we're really talking about infrastructure. And scale is a common conversation that comes up among teams or within organizations that are trying to do purposeful work. When you have a clear mission, when you're trying to do something that's helpful and useful to a community, you want to be able to do more of it. You're motivated by the positive change that you're creating. And so the natural question is, how do we help more people with this work? And let's step back and describe impact as it's commonly discussed. Impact means that larger, more systemic level change that creates conditions for people to succeed in. Organizations have various missions around impact. It could look something like helping more students from low-income backgrounds go to college. It could look like providing more healthy foods within a neighborhood or community. It could look like building more affordable housing so people have safe and secure places to live. This is change that is systemic. It changes the conditions that people operate under. Here's the key. Impact, this type of impact work that we're talking about, makes change possible. It doesn't make change automatic. So when an organization is thinking about impact, there's still an element that people have to come into, to use a marketing term, come into the funnel or come into the organization to take advantage of the opportunity that the organizations have created. Just because there's a program or process to help kids get to college doesn't mean that all of the kids in a specific population know about this program or feel like this program is a good fit for them. They may self-select out, but the impact that mission-focused organizations often create is around that possibility, changing the possibility for people. And so when we think about impact and when we think about should we focus on impact, it's a natural outworking of the work that your organization is doing. Just like a business is built around a specific product or service, the impact end of the work is built around a specific function. You're not trying to address every possible impact in your work. And in fact, there are political differences across the country within communities as to what creates impact and how that should be defined. What you're doing as an organization is defining the conditions that you think will cause people to thrive and are helping to create those conditions through your primary mission. Infrastructure is sometimes not as exciting as a term or a word. The mission itself is the thing that often motivates people to get involved. It's the exciting thing, is that thing that we just said. It creates change for people. Infrastructure is more of the business model behind it. It's the policies, the procedures, the goals, the metrics, the standards. It's all of the things that go into creating the internal conditions or the conditions for the organization itself to deliver on the impact. And in some cases, infrastructure really does mean very tangible things. When we talk about infrastructure, we can mean things like moving into a larger physical space so that the organization can bring more people in or have a specific gathering place for a community to interact with one another. Infrastructure can mean the technology tools that the organization is implementing so that they aren't doing so many processes by hand. As I said, the goals are part of the infrastructure. So having clearly defined definitions around what each person is doing and what each role is doing all creates the infrastructure of the organization. Most people have been in organizations that are functioning well and in organizations that are not functioning well. And some people do thrive in organizations that are less structured and a little bit more fluid in their work and their objectives. And in many cases, those are small organizations where people are doing a lot in their roles. As your organization thinks about infrastructure, consider the idea that when the work is broader, when you're a small team or a small organization, let's say you're an organization with under 10 people, the roles do typically tend to be broader because there's a lot of work that needs to be done and just unexpected things that come up from time to time that have to be addressed by somebody. For example, your role might be to be the executive director, but if you have an issue with the technology in the organization, you either need to then take some time out of your day to fix it or to find somebody externally if you don't have anybody in your team to address that technology issue. Whereas in a larger organization, people do tend to have more defined roles and processes. And many times, people who are functioning in those smaller teams and smaller organizations are in that role because they are somewhat comfortable with the fluidity of the work and the fluidity of the job. But in order to scale, refining that and bringing it in to create some systems and processes around what gets done, what's prioritized, and who does what is what helps bring the work forward. That's part of a change management process because sometimes people don't like certain things taken off of their plate. They like to have that broad perspective or that broad layer of work. Infrastructure is all the inputs that make it possible for the organization to create the impact or the external change in the community. The key question is, where does external change really live? How does external change take place? As we talked about a few minutes ago, impact is that broad level change that creates conditions for people to thrive in. that might be different based on the organizational type, mission, and objectives. However, let's keep in mind that there's really two levels that change happens for people. And one is on the individual level. So that very one-on-one level where somebody is directly and closely involved in someone's life and in someone's process, providing one-on-one coaching and guidance that shifts their perspective and changes the idea of what that person sees as possible for themselves. At Profound Hope Industries, we use the hope framework because we believe that hope is really the driving force that moves people forward. And one-on-one relationships are one of the key ways to create that mental shift or that mindset shift for people so that they can see a vision of change for themselves. The other level of creating external change is at the systemic level or at the higher level, often above where organizations work. To some degree, organizations are creating that systemic change, as we've talked about with impact, by adding more affordable housing to the available housing in the community. That means more people have the opportunity to access affordable housing. By addressing food insecurity by bringing a grocery store into the community means more people can walk to the grocery store and get access to healthy foods. So those things create change for people. There are often conditions even above that make that possible at the policy level. So change is often happening at the one-on-one level or at the high level systemic place where policies and external forces determine what does or doesn't happen. Some of those policy impacts are what create the conditions that your own organization can work in. And most organizations are operating somewhere in the middle. They're not necessarily directly working one-on-one with people. Some organizations do have one-on-one case management or coaching functions, but impact is often centered on mid-level work, taking that policy that creates the conditions that allow certain things within a community and then applying them to that community. Maybe a policy has created conditions to make it more sustainable or affordable for an organization to bring a grocery store in, and then your organization is the one creating the grocery store in the community. As an organization, you're often navigating the tension between those two levels of change, providing services for people directly and one-on-one and addressing the broader systemic policy conditions that allow people to walk into the change or the opportunity as it becomes available. To do so successfully takes infrastructure. So to answer the question that we began with, should my organization focus on impact or infrastructure? In 90% of the cases, I would suggest that your organization should focus on infrastructure, on purposeful infrastructure. You have a mission and you have a vision, and that mission itself has attracted people naturally to the work. There are people who have joined because they care about the impact that your organization is trying to make. To navigate that level of change to make an impact requires the infrastructure that gives people working in the organization, doing the work, the capacity to do so. It also creates clarity, and clarity is what attracts people to your vision. Think about the last time somebody made a vague request to you. You didn't know how to help them, and the same is true for organizations. When you're clear on your processes and your procedures, for example, let's say you're applying for a bigger contract and you know exactly what tools, resources, systems, and roles that you have to execute on that particular contract, you can describe it so much more clearly, and people are more likely to buy in and to support that work. Purposeful infrastructure means creating policies and procedures that align around the mission itself and has the same values that the organization started with when they began to build the mission. So if you're in the middle of impact work and you're wondering what to do next, consider working on your systems and policies to help the organization sustain itself. A mission without a clear business model doesn't survive to leave a legacy long term. Although the impact is exciting, it's the infrastructure that creates the foundation to allow the work to be sustained long term and through different environments and different conditions. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about how we help organizations, both for profit and nonprofit, build the infrastructure that creates that impact that they desire, click the link in the comments, and please like and subscribe so we continue making more content to support your work. Thanks for watching.